It's Jermaine Burton. That's the guy.
I had a feeling you were going to bring him, so yeah, he's on my list. So I'm going to let you have this one.
I knew we were going to agree on Jermaine Burton. I knew that walking into this because, again, we talk about what the NFL draft, like how that played out as far as the off the field stuff and him falling, and I would not have been surprised just based off of the talent of Jermaine Burton if you were to tell me all the off field stuff wasn't a thing. And he went in the first round as opposed to the third round of the NFL draft, wouldn't shock me at all. I loved him. And I didn't get to his film until later in the pre-draft process. And he was one of those guys, like, once I got to the film, I was like, oh my Lord, why are people not talking about this guy as much as they should? And I think one of the big things, and again, the same bucket, I think there were two players in this last draft class that were mischaracterized as far as the role they played in for their collegiate offenses and the role they will play in the NFL. And I already discussed it with Javon Baker, but the same sentiments about Jermaine Burton. I think he could run the entire route tree. I think he's a player that can separate at all three levels of a defense. He could beat man, he could beat zone. I think a lot of things, and I don't want to bury Milroe in the quarterback play at Alabama, but it was a big factor because when you turn on the film, he won consistently, just burning guys, whether it was route nuance, whether it was speed, whether it was a combination of the two, whether it was physicality. I mean, you look at his per route metrics last year, top 30 in receiving grade and yards per route run. He was in a 82nd percentile or higher in separation versus single coverage and yards per route run. You marry all of that with the film and talk about, like, look, like, I understand he's going to fight for targets on a weekly basis with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and one of those players has to get dinged up for this type of thing to come to fruition. But Jermaine Burton is a guy that I've remained, like, even if he doesn't turn out to be this year's Puka Nacua, I still think he's going to be a massive value in drafts where people are talking about, okay, well, could Charlie Jones, could any of these other guys, Andre Iosivas, which I was high on him in last year's draft class. But again, you don't go out and you draft a player like Jermaine Burton in the third round, and everybody's seen the clips. Zach Taylor was over the moon, pounding the table, just ecstatic that he drafted him and got him in the room. I think Jermaine Burton is a guy that we're not fully baking in what his upside for targets can be and his upside just for this season, even if Chase and T stay healthy.
Again, it's similar to what I said with the Dolphins duo, where the top two is not ambiguous, but I think everything beyond that, now that Tyler Boyd's gone, is ambiguous. And you said this so perfectly about Jermaine Burton. You look at the routes that he ran above like the prospect average in RP, it's all the like vertical and downfield routes. And they had a quarterback who's just like, I'm not going to bury the guy either, but it's just not there. And especially from like, it was kind of just a chuck it deep offense. It wasn't like Bryce Young, let's work over the middle and matriculate the ball with accuracy like the year before. So, I mean, yeah, I'm with you too. I had the exact same sort of process with Burton where he was one of the final players I think I profiled for the site. And after, charting a few games, I'm like, what am I missing here? Like, what am I missing here? Yep. And then I like start texting a few people I trust. I'm like, oh, okay, got it. That's what I'm missing here. And like, there's a lot of stuff with Burton. But this quote from Nick Saban on draft night, the producer Colin hit us with, I think is a good one. Mm-hmm. He said, quote, "Emotional maturity is the best way to say it. Do the right things all the time. There's a difference between playing with emotion and being emotional. When you get emotional, you make bad decisions and you lose your brain." So again, I think we're just looking for this player to be more mature. And I do, Debra, we're out of our skis and we're talking about this stuff, but I think like if you're projecting, a young dude with this type of sort of mindset, you get into a building like Cincinnati where you have like a central guiding figure there in Joe Burrow. That's like, Damian Harris said this really well on our draft show. We were talking about this. Like, they have that type of quarterback that can grab a receiver like this and be like, yo, dude, like, I need you. Like, I need, look, Tyler Boyd's out the door. Like, there's opportunity here. You want to come be great? Like, be great here. And if Burton wants to be great, this is the type of depth chart and ecosystem to do it.
And Burrow was already doing that. If we want to just go to the social medias, he was already doing that in OTAs, like pulling Jermaine Burton aside. And you could see them going through whether it was routes, play designs, things like that. So I think we're already seeing some of those things where Burrow's taking him aside, and you want to talk about pros, like you put him in a locker room with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Joe Burrow, and I mean, come on, he falls in line. The talent is there, man. I just think the Bengals got a steal on a player that, again, I had a round 1/round 2 grade on him from the talent profile, and they got him in the 3rd round. If he would have gotten the draft capital, again, Harmon, we'd be talking about him in a different light. Like, people would be discussing the parallels of him versus Roma Dunze. If he'd have gotten that type of draft capital and been selected in the back half of the 1st round by Cincinnati, and he enters the depth chart with Chase and T. Higgins, people would be discussing him in that wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 bucket, which I think he already should be discussed in as well. But that conversation would be commonplace and not so just off the beaten path.
Yeah, and look, this is not a perfect way to do this, but the last 3 years, Tyler Boyd, 94, 82, 98 targets. Like, there is opportunity available in this offense, even if the top 2 guys stay healthy. And man, like, he brings a totally different skill set than Tyler Boyd, because I agree with you. He's a full field separator, but he's more of a pure outside receiver. I think Chase is going to play inside more this year than he ever has, which is going to be big for him. Been talking about that a lot ever since Jamar Chase was actually the one who said to me at the Super Bowl, I am trying to gain the coaching staff's trust to play more in the slot. That was an interesting kind of thing he threw out there. Chase is an interesting guy. Jamar's an interesting dude, having talked to him a couple times, but he is he's a grinder, and like has that type of work ethic here that I think can bring these young dudes like a Jermaine Burton along. Just real quick, because I'll say this. I'm going to make an executive decision, and I'm going to wave Jermaine Burton into our 3 finalists here. Like, he's definitely got to be a part for sure.
We're hand holding too much for him not to make the finalists. Like, he has to.
We'll figure out the other 2 guys, but he's definitely one of the finalists. But just because you threw out Andre Iosivas, I have not worked on him at all. I did a little bit on Charlie Jones, and I kind of thought Charlie Jones might be an interesting sleeper slot prospect. So if it doesn't work out with old Burton here, he's someone to know too. But Iosivas, like, what's the deal with this guy? Because I've had a lot of people ask me like what my thoughts. I've not worked on him at all. So what do you think about him? Because you mentioned you were kind of high on him as a prospect.
I liked him as a prospect, and when I was watching him, I think it was pre-Senior Bowl and stuff, he has all the raw talent in the world as far as just physical ability, but you saw some of as far as him entering the NFL, he needed to clean up a lot of different things as far as route running. And we're talking about a guy that played a lot of different sports, so wasn't fully focused on football for the entirety of like high school, college, things like that. But now we're seeing the growth and maturity in his game. I think playing through contact, especially at the catch point, was something that kind of plagued him. The route running needed to get better entering the NFL. We saw some of those things get a little bit better last season when he was thrust into the starting lineup. Like, had some pretty good fantasy weeks for us, but I think he still needs to continue to build on those areas of his game, because some of these guys, they haven't had the same amount of reps or honing all the small little nuances of playing the wide receiver position, because either they haven't played it a ton, or maybe they just got to football later in their lives than other people who've been running routes since they were like 12 and 15 years old.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's kind of my general thoughts about him, but I was curious your opinion just because, again, you sounded like you were kind of higher on him there coming in here. So